started by looking at the standard. We're looking at RI7 as our focus, and then we're doing RI9 to include 2 texts. So we're asking kids to reach the standard, and we're asking them to do it with 2 texts. So the standard is interpret information from various sources presented visually, orally, and quantitatively, and explain how the information contributes to the understanding of the text. Once we looked at the standard and figured out exactly what kids need to know and be able to do to reach that standard, we began with the end in mind, and we decided on a product that students will be creating that would include several nonfiction text features while also focusing on our science standard, which we're looking at right now as landforms. We created a list of landforms that students could select from, and then we did have students select one of the landforms. And this is a teacher-created model of what the final student products will look similar to, for beginning with the end in mind. Then we decided that we should create a formative assessment to check in with students. We had extended our unit on nonfiction text features. So we wanted to see what our students were starting with so we could adjust our instruction based on the feedback we received from our kids. And so we pieced together an assessment using several of the items that we figured out students needed to be able to know and the skills that they needed to be able to do. We put all those pieces together to create that formative assessment.
From previous materials we'd also had used or had collected earlier, so we weren't reinventing the wheel.
And then we designed and deconstructed standards and targets. So we started with the standard, we created several learning targets for each day, and we created a day-by-day instructional plan based on those targets. And we did it in a way that we wanted students to be able to master each target before we moved on to the next one, so that they could reach that the big standard at the end. And then at the end of last PLC, we created the day-by-day instructional plan. I kind of already talked about that. So we designed and created strategies.
How we're going to do it.
How we're going to do it.
What we're going to be doing, what the students are going to be doing, and what's expected of them each day.
So one of our learning targets to start the very beginning was, I can identify text features and the information they provide. So we administered the formative check-in to see what they remembered, what they could use, what they couldn't use. And then we created a list, a T-chart with the class as a group. What text features do you remember? What do you remember the information they provided? And then once that kind of dried up, then we started to say, well, what about this? And then, that provides us with this. We created T-charts. And then another one is, I can explain the information I find in charts, maps, diagrams, timelines. So now we're looking specifically at a very specific text feature at a time. And we're introducing, we have a little landforms book that we have started looking at. So for example, we have in here, this is our mentor text. There's a map and a diagram in the first couple of pages. And we literally said, what's the first thing you want to look at when you're looking at a map? And have the kids talk to their neighbor, what do they look at? And we start with the title because it tells us. And then we looked at all the different parts of just the map, because one of the things that we also recognize is a lot of our kids don't know how to read a map for the information that they need. And so those are 2 examples of learning targets and specific lesson plans that we created last week.
Questions?
Comment. So there are 3 things that I want to point out here, and I want you to really think about. The first one has to do with begin with the end in mind. Talk to each other. Why is that essential? So in other words, they identified their primary standard, supporting standard, and then they went to begin with the end in mind. Why is that critical? Talk to each other. You have about 30 seconds, and then I want to hear answers. Why is that important?
Why is that critical?
I'm thinking that it's critical because we want them to hit that target. So we want the students to know the expectation of where we're headed towards, and then show them how we're going to break it down into smaller chunks in order for them to
We need to be aware of what steps they need to master in order to proceed along the way. And where they need to
No, the one time,
first time we actually really know what we're
We
doing.
feel like we got this. We might not know that.
Well, and the reality is, if we don't know what the end target is, and if our students don't know, maybe they, in their little, developing minds, they'll think, but I reached this learning target, and that's important, but really we want them to reach the common core target. So,
The big one at the very
Right.
end, kind of that scaffold, all of that.
Okay, so let's regroup, please, in 3, 2, 1. Why is beginning with the end in mind so important?
Because that's the expectation we have on our students, and that's what we want from them.
Okay, so we have to understand where we're going with the students,
What we
right?
want they have to
Okay,
understand.
how does that help us in the design of instruction and just this whole process of PLC work? If you figure that out, how does that help?
When I think of a platform at the top of the stairs, we want our students to be on that platform. But they can't skip all the steps. They can't jump to the top necessarily. So each target is one step towards the platform. And if we don't know where the platform is, we can't design the steps to reach it.
What a great visual. Wow, that was really very powerful. Okay, all right, great. So, having the end in mind is essential, right? I mean, if we don't know where we're going, what ends up happening is we end up picking a bunch of activities that might be related to the standard, and I'm going to say, but we really don't understand how to sequence, how to scaffold the instruction, and the activities aren't as relevant as they could be. The formative assessment, what did they do that was really a good idea? When they created their formative assessment that they have here, how did they go about doing that?
looks like they pieced together previously used materials of nonfiction text features. And the other nice thing, it looks like they actually gave students kind of a target, an example before they got started, right?
And I tried to make it a little bit different in the wording from what we had done before, in that they had to look for some key identifiers. So, like, for example, we had the index. So the index, the definition was that it lists all the pages on which a topic can be found. Different from the table of contents, which tells me it does tell me the page that the information can be found, but it doesn't list all of the places I can find it.
So that was really helpful. What's the advantage of using resources that you've utilized in the past? Why is that a plus?
Well, you're familiar with them, and so you've got some kind of knowledge of what the content is,
Absolutely.
and it's also a good review of material that you've studied before.
Yeah, and it's a heck of a lot easier than starting with
Yeah,
a blank
and
sheet of
start-
paper, right?
It's much better than starting from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Okay, now
And the
last.
best part was that having learned more about assessment, I can go back and just change a couple words, and the assessment's much more effective.
You're a better consumer. You are. Yeah, because now you understand assessment better, so now you can look at an item and you can actually tell, right? Because we've had some experiences where we've gone, oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah, not necessarily assessing what we want, right? Even if it is in a book, right? Okay, so beginning with the end in mind, essential. Using resources to create your formative assessment, really important and helpful. Last consideration has to do with creating their teaching strategies. What did they talk about? There were two elements when they talked about really mapping out their teaching strategies and instructional plan. You get another opportunity to talk to a neighbor or have table talk. You only have 15 seconds because there are only two elements you're trying to really identify. What did they talk about? They considered two elements that were essential to their instructional plan. Talk to each other.
It looks like they considered depth of knowledge and their learning targets. I don't know if those are the two she was looking for, but yeah, related to the Common Core standards.
One of the things that they did say that I heard is that they were not going on with the student unless all.
Okay, and your time is up. And answer is?
What are students doing and what is the teacher doing? Not
Yep.
just what is the teacher doing, but what are the students doing as well. It's that fishbone. Go back to that fishbone. So one goes this way. What's the teacher doing? One bone goes this way. What is the student doing while the teacher's teaching?
So when you're looking at those results indicators, it's critical for you to be really clear about what's the teacher doing, what are the students doing, right? So 3 big walkaways, begin with the end in mind, because otherwise your kids are going to be walking up a whole bunch of stairs and they're never going to land on a platform. Formative assessment, use resources and pull from items and know which items are good and going to help you in assessing what your outcome is. And then last, when you start looking at instructional plan, you've got to look at teacher considerations, student considerations. Now here's the pièce de résistance. Not only did they accomplish all that, but they stayed on task. And for this group, that is huge. Give them a big round of applause.
Well, another thing that I thought I heard them say is that they have all of these targets scaffolded to get the to end with their goal that they had in mind. But I thought I heard them say that they weren't going on until the kids got target 1, target 2, target 3. Was that difficult?
As far as accomplishing that, but we're still pretty early
Okay.
in this in our steps. I think we're only on day 3. At least I know that Sylvia and I are on day 3. I believe Jessica's the same thing, which is where we're actually beginning to have them show and demonstrate. So we actually haven't even completed that first real comprehensive step yet.
So we thought about it in like we're coming to know, and then we're gonna, work to finally where they can show that they know.
Well, I want to applaud you because that's what we're going for, mastery. And that's that gradual release done well. So, kudos. That's awesome.